Welcome, F1 fanatics. You are locked into the DRS zone. We've just seen Free Practice 2 wrap up. And look, if you just glanced at the timing sheets and thought, it's just Friday, well, you might have missed the real story brewing underneath.
Yeah, absolutely. Because today we're not just, reading times. Our mission here is to really get under the hood, cut through the usual excuses, the traffic, the tire prep stuff, and see what the actual data tells us.
We're taking a scalpel to the telemetry, basically. Try to expose the real performance narratives.
Yeah.
And yeah, especially focusing on some shocks and maybe even some collapses.
Exactly. Who's genuinely quick? Who's dialed in the setup? And maybe more importantly, who seems a bit lost?
Okay, let's dive straight into the biggest headline, I think. McLaren's. Well, let's call it a Black Friday. It
Yeah.
was stark. Top-line results. Verstappen P1, no surprise there. Leclerc P2 for Ferrari.
And Antonelli P3, which is, a really strong showing for Mercedes. Definitely something to watch.
Right. And then Lando Norris P4. Pretty solid. About 2.5 tenths off max. Seems like standard procedure, doesn't it?
It does, until you look literally across the garage. Oscar Piastri, P12.
P12.
And that's not like midfield tight. That's a huge 8.5 tenths away from Verstappen at the front. 8.5 tenths.
8.5 tenths. I mean, that's not just a gap. That's a chasm for a team that's been fighting for podiums. This isn't just a bad lap.
No, not at all. And this is where we get into segment one, the collapse of the papaya, as you put it.
Yeah, and crucially, our sources, the data we're looking at, it suggests you can't just blame this on, I caught traffic or the tires weren't ready.
No, this felt different. It felt like a performance deficit that was just baked in by decree almost of the car and driver combination on that day. A structural issue right from the off.
And if the short-run pace was worrying...
Oh, the long run was properly alarming. Looking at the race pace telemetry, Piastri was consistently, and I mean consistently, 4 to 8 tenths slower per lap than Lando Norris.
4 to 8 tenths on the same tire.
On the same compound tire, yeah. And it wasn't just the stopwatch. You could see it. The onboards showed him really wrestling the car. Lots of micro corrections, especially in the high-speed stuff. He looked nervous.
Yeah.
Unsettled.
Which really brings up that crucial question in modern F1, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Is this purely a setup problem, or is there a confidence thing creeping in? A spiral?
Well, they're so linked, aren't they? Especially with these cars.
We saw Norris struggle earlier this season, remember? When they changed that front suspension setup, he really hated it, felt uncomfortable. He managed to push through it.
Exactly. He found a way. But now it almost looks like that fundamental discomfort, that lack of feel or trust in the car has maybe migrated over to Piastri's side of the garage.
If you lose that confidence, you just can't push to the absolute limit, can you? You can't feel where the edge is.
And if you can't find the edge, how do you fine-tune the setup perfectly? It's a vicious cycle. And when the difference between, say, P3 and P12 is measured in tiny fractions of a second, being even slightly off with setup or confidence, it's catastrophic.
Okay, but let's zoom out a bit. Connect this to the bigger picture. Some analysis we've seen floats this. Stagnation theory. Is this just a bad Friday, or is it symptomatic of McLaren maybe easing off the development pedal a bit too soon?
That's definitely a theme emerging. You look at Red Bull, Ferrari, even Mercedes, there were those whispers about their flexible front wing. Again, they seem to be constantly bringing small, targeted updates.
Little bits and pieces, yeah.
Whereas McLaren, they've been relatively quiet on the upgrade front recently. The feeling, or maybe the criticism from some corners, is that perhaps they got a bit comfortable asleep on the laurels, as the phrase goes, relying on the big step they made mid-season.
Okay, hang on. Let me push back slightly there. Could that be strategic, though? I mean, maybe they knew they had a decent baseline and they're deliberately saving resources, budget cap, wind tunnel time, whatever, for bigger push later or even for next year. There's always that balance, right?
Yeah, that's a fair point. It could be strategic. But the risk, looking at today's data, is that the strategy might be backfiring right now because the game seems to have shifted slightly.
So,
well, people like Juan Pablo Montoya have been pointing this out. We're maybe entering a phase where the massive, obvious aero gains are harder to find because the regs are tightening up.
right, diminishing returns on the big wings and floors.
Exactly. So the major performance differentiators are shifting more towards maximizing the setup, the suspension, the whole mechanical grip side of things, how the car actually uses the tires, how it rides the curbs.
The dark arts again, those tiny details.
The absolute tiny details. And if McLaren hasn't been aggressively chasing those centiseconds in mechanical setup while others have, Well, that's where you get leapfrogged. Even if your baseline aero is still strong, if you stand still in that area, you're effectively going backwards.
It's a brutal development race.
Yeah.
Okay, so if McLaren is struggling with those mechanical tenths, let's pivot. Let's talk about the car and the driver. That seems to have unlocked pretty much every single one of those centiseconds. Red Bull, Max Verstappen.
Yeah, the contrast couldn't be much sharper, could it?
He's just the benchmark right now.
And the telemetry for Max is, well, it's clinical. He's not necessarily gaining huge amounts just on the straights. It's very specific corners, the high demand zones for mechanical grip, specifically corners C4 and C6 stand out.
Okay, let's break those down for people visualizing the track. C4 is that tight left-hander, loads the car up, leads onto that longish run. C6, again, often a tricky one, high load. Why are these the Red Bull hunting grounds?
Because they demand absolutely perfect use of the curbs, the pianos as they call them, and massive rotation from the car at relatively low speeds. And this is interesting because curb riding used to be a bit of a weakness for Red Bull, remember?
Yeah, they seemed quite stiff sometimes.
Exactly. But clearly they've sorted that. The suspension, the setup. It allows Verstappen to just attack the apex, get the car rotated incredibly early, and get back on the power sooner than anyone else. It's all about that dynamic load transfer being perfectly managed.
But here's where I think it gets really fascinating. It feels like it's more than just the car doing the work. What is Max's edge? His secret weapon? It's almost like he has this extra sense for what the track is doing.
I think you're right. It boils down to his unique ability to read the grip. He seems to have this almost innate understanding, maybe better than anyone ever, of exactly where the limit of tire adhesion is at all times.
So how does that translate into lap time?
Think about how most drivers brake, then turn. You brake hard, release, then steer. Max seems to do it all together, combine braking and steering. He's modulating the brake pressure and the steering angle simultaneously, keeping that tire right on the absolute ragged edge, like 99.9% of its potential grip, through that whole phase.
Dancing on a knife edge.
Pretty much, yeah. Think back to braking zones like Imola or maybe the final chicane at Suzuka, places where other drivers have to be a bit more cautious, build in a margin to avoid a snap or a lockup. Max just seems to carry more speed deeper into the corner while rotating the car without watching out wide on exit.
It's perfect metering of forces.
It really is. And that ability, that feel, that's kind of independent of the latest front wing update, you know? That's the driver extracting the absolute final few hundredths from the mechanical platform he's given.
Okay, quick pause here. If you're watching this on YouTube, welcome to the DRS Zone. Great to have you with us. Don't forget to hit subscribe for loads more F1 analysis like this. We're really getting into the nitty-gritty today. Right, back to it. Let's talk Ferrari. Charles Leclerc, P2, look quick. Looks like a genuine threat, at least over one lap. But what about the long runs? Can they sustain a challenge to Max over a race distance?
Well, Leclerc's pace, especially initially, is brilliant, explosive. Ferrari seem really, really good at switching the tires on immediately and extracting maximum grip straight out of the box on those long runs.
Maximum attack mode.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a familiar but, the data tends to back up the long-standing narrative. Red Bull just seems to have better tire management, better consistency over a full stint. Leclerc's times tend to drop off a bit more quickly than Verstappen's.
So that fast start might fade.
It often does. It means that a fast start can turn into a bit of a tricky second half of the stint, trying to hang on.
Which forces Ferrari into a very specific strategic corner, doesn't it?
Absolutely. If they want to win, realistically, their best shot, maybe their only shot, is grabbing pole position. Then they need an absolutely massive start, get clear, and try to build a gap to Max in that first stint before the tire degradation really kicks in for them and allows Max's consistency to reel them back in.
Get out of DRS range and just hope it's enough.
Pretty much. It puts enormous pressure on nailing the setup for that perfect qualifying lap while still having just enough race pace to survive. It's a really fine balancing act for them.
Okay, let's shift focus again, segment 3. And look, because we want to be fair and accurate, we should probably revisit Piastri's quick lap again, his P12 time.
Yeah, we should apply a correction.
Yeah.
Being fair, the telemetry on his fastest lap attempt does show a really obvious mistake. There's a significant speed drop-off, maybe, 16 kilometers per hour in one specific corner complex.
Which basically ruins the lap.
It kills the lap time progression right there.
Yeah.
So if we try and estimate what that mistake cost him, let's be generous. Say it was 0.3, which is quite a lot for one error.
Okay, so add 0.3 back to his time, hypothetically.
Even with that very generous correction,
Yeah.
he probably only slots into P8, maybe P9 at best.
Ah,
So yes, he made a mistake, but even without it, he's still behind Norris, still outside that absolute top group, and still right in the thick of the midfield fight. The correction helps, but it doesn't fundamentally change the story that the car, or the combination, wasn't working for him today.
And P8, P9, that throws him straight into those incredibly tight midfield micro battles. Specifically today, the all-Spanish scrap. Fernando Alonso, P8 for Aston Martin, Carlos Sainz, P9 for Williams.
And get this, their best laps were separated by just 1,000th of a second.
1,000. That's insane. That is the definition of a fight measured in centiseconds, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if you dig into their telemetry tussle, it's fascinating. The Williams, Sainz's car, was actually surprisingly good in the slower corners. Showed decent mechanical compliance. Maybe they found something with the suspension settings there.
Interesting. In Alonso in the Aston.
Alonso clawed all that time back, and a tiny bit more in the fast tests, the quick changes of direction, which suggests the Aston chassis still has that underlying aerodynamic efficiency and stability through high-speed transitions. Different strengths, ending up with almost identical times.
But the big but.
Yeah.
How far were they off the ultimate pace?
That's the really revealing bit. Even with their cars working well in different areas, both Alonso and Sainz combined lose about half a second to Verstappen across just 4 specific corner complexes.
Half a second to 4 corners.
Yep. That just shows you the gap, the sheer performance advantage that the Red Bull still holds when everything clicks. It quantifies that difference.
Okay, let's bring it back to McLaren one last time, just to really hammer home the scale of the issue today, especially for Piastri, that long-run comparison you mentioned earlier.
Right. This is the data point that, if I were McLaren management, would make me sit up and pay very close attention, maybe feel a bit nervous.
Oh.
Remember, Piastri did his long-run simulation on the soft tire compound. That's the fastest tire, but the one that degrades the quickest.
Okay, got it. The qualifying tire, basically.
More or less. Alonso, meanwhile, did his long run on the medium tire, the more durable, generally slower, but more consistent race tire.
Right, so Piastri on softs, Alonso on mediums.
And Piastri's overall average lap time on those soft tires was pretty much the same as Alonso's average lap time on the medium tire.
Wait, say that again? On the faster tire, Piastri was only matching the pace of Alonso on the harder tire.
Roughly, yes. Allowing for fuel loads and things being slightly different, but the trend was clear. That is a genuinely staggering performance difference when you factor in the expected tire delta.
Oh.
It suggests that the McLaren, in Piastri's hands, today at least, even on its theoretically fastest rubber, was performing at basically the same underlying level as a solid midfield car, like the Aston, on its preferred race compound. That's a big worry.
That really puts a number on the struggle, doesn't it?
Okay, so let's try and wrap this deep dive into FP2 up. What's the big takeaway here? It feels like the narrative of the season, or at least this phase of it, has really shifted.
I think it has. It feels less about just bolting on the biggest, newest aero package now.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that's still important, but the real battleground, the place where performance is being unlocked, seems to be in mastering those incredibly fine details of mechanical setup, suspension geometry, tire interaction.
The dark arts we talked about.
Exactly. And it seems McLaren, perhaps, got caught standing still, just as others, Red Bull, Ferrari, maybe Mercedes are getting there too, really started to push hard and make gains in that specific area. They've surged past by mastering those details.
So stagnation versus a highly efficient setup-driven advancement.
That sums it up pretty well. The fight for every 10th, every grid slot, it's being won and lost right now. And how will you optimize those mechanical factors? Because that gives the driver the confidence to do what Max does, that combined braking and steering, pushing right to the limit. And if you don't have that confidence, if the car feels nervous,
then you're like Piastri today, wrestling the car, leaving time on the table, no matter how talented you are inherently. The margins are just incredibly fine now, measured in centiseconds, and those tiny margins are deciding everything.
Right. So let's leave our listeners with a final thought, something to chew on. We've seen the data, that stark difference between Norris and Piastri today. We've talked about the potential mental side, the confidence factor.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, given how high pressure F1 is, can Oscar Piastri somehow mentally reset overnight, find that connection with the car, and unlock that missing half second or more for qualifying tomorrow? Or is this fundamental setup issue, this deficit we saw today, just too big to fix in one go?
That internal battle, finding that feeling again, that could honestly define the rest of his season, couldn't it? It's a huge ask.
It really is. That's the big question mark hanging over tomorrow.
Definitely one to watch.
Okay, That's us for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us in the DRS zone. Please make sure you subscribe and follow us wherever you get your F1 analysis fix so you don't miss our next breakdown.
We'll catch you next time.